I would like to, first of all, thank Dr. John Chapman and the IISS for inviting me again to this very important forum. I'm very honored and a bit awed by the presence of so many distinguished leaders. Also, I would like to congratulate His Excellency, Mr. Sébastien Lecornu, the new Minister of the Armed Forces of France. He's a bit younger than myself. His Excellency, Mr. Kishi Nawa, Minister of Defense of Japan. His Excellency Dr. Ng Han, Admiral Teo Chee Hian, Senior Minister for National Security of Singapore. Distinguished colleagues, when we talk about managing geopolitical competition in this region, I must remind many of you, and I don't think I need to remind my brothers from Southeast Asia, that Southeast Asia, in fact, Asia has been for many centuries the crossroads of imperialism, big power domination, exploitation, depredation for many, many years. The Second World War resulted in a new spurt of independence movements, but these independence movements, the fight against imperialism and colonialism has been going on for many hundreds of years. The experience of our brothers in Indochina, the experience of our brothers in the Philippines, in India, in many parts of Asia and Pacific, makes us very, very aware of the need for wise and benevolent leadership. We are the most affected by big power competition. Therefore, in our experience, during the last 40 to 50 years, we have come to our own, the Asian way of resolving these challenges. We have decided that our common experience of being dominated, of being enslaved, of being exploited, forces us now to strive to create a peaceful environment, an environment of friendship. We had our differences. We have competing territorial claims. Even now, we have territorial differences with our brothers from Malaysia. We have claims with Vietnam, competing claims. We have differences with other countries, with China. But our view is that we must strive for understanding, for communication, and we are proud that we have proved to the world that former rivals, former enemies, we have bad experiences of confrontation, etc., etc. But we have resolved that. We have achieved, I think, maybe nearly 50 years of peace, 50 years of friendly cooperation, and we have succeeded in achieving prosperity. Therefore, In facing the current international dynamics, we are very concerned. Yes, we are very sad at what's happening in Europe, in the Ukraine. It seems far away from us, but it affects us directly. The food problem, the energy problem. We understand that. We understand the competing rivalry between the established world power and the rising world power. But for Asia, China has always been a great power for thousands of years. Our society, our culture is very much influenced by China, by India. The great religions in our country come from India, from China. Therefore, for us, we always will strive to respect all the big powers. For Indonesia, our stand is very clear. We respect all the big powers and all the powers that need to have their space, their rights respected. We support a rules-based international order because we are the most affected by any order that just relies on big power. Our experience of being colonized, our experience of being exploited is always in our subconscious. Therefore, Indonesia opted to be non-aligned. We opted not to be engaged in any military alliance. This sounds sometimes like we are sitting on the fence, but no. This is a conscious decision because for us to respect the interests of all our neighbors and of all the big powers in this region is essential. And we have achieved that with our brothers in ASEAN. And therefore, we are trying to achieve that in this situation. We are convinced that the leaders of the great powers realize the big responsibility on their shoulders. We are convinced that the leaders of China will stand up to their responsibility with wisdom and benevolence because it is their philosophical teaching. Confucius, all the great philosophers of China have always taught us that power and leadership must always come with benevolence. Therefore, we still are optimistic. We respect the United States. The United States actually has proven to be an anti-colonial power. They were one of the first colonies of Britain that fought against colonialism. They supported our fight for independence. We do not forget our friends who supported us. Australia also supported our independence. We are in the fortunate situation of being surrounded by friendly countries. And this is also, I think, part of our weakness. Because we are surrounded by friendly countries, sometimes our elite becomes complacent. And we think that when we are surrounded by nice people, the situation will always be there in a friendly and conducive mood. What the situation in Ukraine taught us is we can never take our security and independence for granted. Therefore, we are determined to strengthen our defense, and that's exactly the key word. Our outlook is a defensive outlook. We have stated that we will defend our territory with every means in our disposal, and we learn from the examples of our neighbors and of the situation in the world. We see the heroism of the Vietnamese people in their 30-year struggle against colonialism. We also see how China fought against invasion, fought against foreign intervention for many years. And we respect all these countries. I think I will not go deeper, or because I'm limited by the time. And so therefore I will conclude my remarks by saying that with all the challenges that we face, we are optimistic. We are convinced that wisdom, rationality, common sense will prevail. Thank you very much.
Pak Prabowo, thank you very much for that assessment and that heartfelt perspective from the Republic of Indonesia, a statement not just of a Minister of Defense, but also of a statesman. Thank you very much indeed, Pak Prabowo. Could I please now invite Sébastien Lecornu, the Minister of the Armed Forces of France, to give what I might style his inaugural address to the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much, sir. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen ministers, ladies and gentlemen, dear John, I'm very happy to be with you this morning. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your birthday wishes. I want to thank the International Institute for Strategic Studies for organizing this key forum. And I want to thank our host, Singapore, a key stakeholder of the Indo-Pacific and a strategic partner for France. I want to salute my Indonesian and Japanese colleagues with whom I'm delighted to discuss today. This dialogue platform is more necessary than ever. Our strategic environment is daily more constrained and polarized, and this at a time when we need cooperation and cohesion. France is a several times resident nations in the Pacific. This means that our engagement in this vast region is one of the intangible elements of our sovereignty and of our defense and security policy. To put it simply, your stakes are also our stakes. This is the obvious reason for my presence here a few days only after my appointment, and this is also the reason why our presidency of the Council of the European Union has strongly promoted concrete actions for the benefit of this region. This requires well-balanced, reciprocal partnerships marked by trust and covering areas of expertise of the EU such as maritime security, connectivity, cybersecurity, and of course also, as we all know, the fight against disinformation. First of all, I want to recall a double reality that the Russian aggression against Ukraine brought to light again. The threats against the security of Europe are threats for the rest of the world. Conversely, the security threat elsewhere in the world continues to be a priority for Europe. In that respect, the Indo-Pacific plays a key role to preserve the fragile balances of the world for global economy and for the security of the supply chains. The coronavirus pandemic has helped us realize that again, and preserving these balances is, for us, especially important. The invasion of Ukraine, however, places a fundamental challenge at the center of the concerns for the international order again. I want, of course, to speak about the use of the force in obvious violation of international laws. This directly threatens the security of all the states, which everywhere in the world build their own security on the basis of the law and the respect of their commitments. We do not want the illegal use of the force and of the threat to become a new standard, especially when this is associated with revisionist or expansionist aims. Beyond this key challenge, that we heard in the opening speeches yesterday, we are facing three main stakes in the geopolitical rivalries in the Asia-Pacific area, and I would like to mention them especially. First of all, competition between powers is increasingly taking various shapes and is getting tougher with economic, technological, but also military dimensions. The re-emergence of tensions in the China Sea and the threat they represent for the access to common areas bears testimony of that. I would also like to recall our attachment to peace and stability in the Strait of Taiwan, where crisis could have devastating consequences for all, even beyond the region. Hybrid strategies develop, and they have a genuine destabilizing effect. They make conflictuality even more complex when we can brutally switch from competition to dispute or even confrontation, especially using civilian assets to produce military effects. Then, the collective response mechanisms are fragilized and the multinational forums are often questioned, unfortunately. Using multilateralism and fait accompli can especially be seen in the acceleration of the arms race and in the increased risk of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. We cannot reconcile ourselves to do that, and as you know, this is an old French position. Finally, this power competition comes along with other security challenges, predation of the resources, especially fishing or mining ones, consequences of the dramatic climate changes with terrible natural disasters, fragility of the supply chains, as I already said. These phenomena, against which the answer is bound to be collective, first strike the most fragile populations. France, aware owing to its overseas territories of the specificities of island and coastal territories, sometimes small ones, will stand by all the countries to face them. France, ladies and gentlemen, is experiencing very directly the consequences of these tensions. As a nation of the Indo-Pacific, since about 2 million French citizens live in the Reunion Island, Mayotte, French Polynesia, Wallis and Futuna, and of course, New Caledonia. I know these fellow citizens very well, since I have been the Minister for Overseas Territories for 2 years, as you recalled, time during which I have worked on the regional integration of these territories in the interest of our fellow citizens and that of our partners in the region through existing organizations such as the Pacific Island Forum and the Pacific Community. To meet these security stakes, we have implemented an unprecedented defense strategy in the Indo-Pacific initiated by President Emmanuel Macron in 2018. Regularly adapted to the new challenges since then, it is aimed beyond our sovereignty stakes at defending multilateralism, international rules, the freedom of access to the common areas, a collective and inclusive approach to the security challenges, including those linked to the environment and the climate, and France is one of the champions of that. This strategy concretely relies on permanent and significant military assets deployed in the area. They are naturally our French sovereignty forces, constantly present in our overseas territories in the Indo-Pacific, and our presence forces in Djibouti and in the United Arab Emirates, representing more than 700 soldiers. These capabilities operate in the entire Asia-Pacific area and have many supporting points that we developed and that we will consolidate with our partners in the region. In that respect, I want to thank my colleagues minister present here today. To give you an example, in 2021, we deployed an attack submarine for many months in that area. The Jeanne d'Arc amphibious group went as far as Japan. A Rafale-type fighter setup taking off from France was deployed within a few hours as far as French Polynesia. France thus has an intervention capability over the entire area and develops the interoperability of its forces with those of our partners, especially the US ones. It does so with a constant concern, respecting the sovereignty of each state and developing strong partnerships with a number of countries I have the pleasure of seeing represented here. I can assure you that this commitment of the French armed forces will continue tomorrow. For instance, this year, an air power projection will start from France to carry out a sovereignty mission in the Pacific. It will be mission Pégase 22. Our forces will continue to fulfill their various operational missions and to participate in the major multilateral exercises in the area. They will organize exercises themselves. They will thus keep a significant presence in the region to show France's attachment to the stability of the Asia-Pacific region. France will continue also to reinforce and modernize our capabilities with the constant deployment by 2025 of 6 new ocean patrol vessels in the Indo-Pacific, including 2 already this year in the Pacific, one based in New Caledonia and the other in French Polynesia. These patrol ships will carry out surveillance and sovereignty missions. Along the same line, the 5 Falcons of the Pacific will be replaced by 5 new and more modern aircraft. This commitment is cooperative by essence, as I said. The French strategy in the Indo-Pacific is not aimed against any state. It is implemented in full association with the other states in the area. France participates in the stability of the region by developing partnerships, the objective being to build together more autonomy and more development. These partnerships are not aimed at fueling tensions, but quite conversely, at making sure that each state can contribute to regional security architecture. Since we are here in Singapore, I want to salute the old and faithful defense and security partnership we have forged, and we are going to further strengthen through the signature today of a mutual logistics support agreement. This commitment is responsible and collective by essence and because of our values. As a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, France takes its part in the fight against global threats, proliferation being the first among them. It is involved in the negotiations about the Iranian nuclear capabilities. It participates in the implementation of the United Nations sanctions against North Korea. As president of the Council of the European Union for a few more days, France gave a concrete impulse in order for the Union to be a provider of security in the Indo-Pacific, especially regarding maritime security with the setting up of the coordinated maritime presence in the Indian Ocean. This commitment towards the region was confirmed in the European Union Strategic Compass, the first white paper on defense that the Union has just adopted. This was a historic event. The European Union-China Summit, which was held in April, is also an example of the inclusive approach of the European Union in the Indo-Pacific, through a demanding, well-balanced and lucid dialogue. We persistently support the various security mechanisms promoted by the countries in the region, from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. In Southeast Asia, France remains very attached to the central role of the ASEAN. This is the reason why I would like to say it here again. It would like to join the ADMM Plus to provide its expertise in key domains such as maritime security or peacekeeping. In the South Pacific, France is totally committed alongside island countries, be it in the field of population relief after natural disasters or in that of the fight against illegal, undeclared and non-regulated fishing. We carry this commitment out especially in the framework of the Pacific Quad and the France partnership, which are especially efficient and acknowledged. Faithful to itself and to its multilateral approach, respecting the sovereignty of all, France does not want to join one side or the other. It made the choice of abiding by the law, the only option to ensure security and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I hereby reaffirm on behalf of the President of the Republic France's conviction. The challenges induced by the geopolitical rivalries in a multipolar region require an inclusive and multilateral response based, first of all, on the respect of the law. The problems in the Indo-Pacific region are also the problems of Europe, and it goes the other way round as well. We can work together to solve them. France, whose steadfastness and reliability are known by its partners, already contributes to that and will resolutely continue to do so. This is the reason why I came here today to Singapore, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Much for reminding us that the complexity of modern conflict is also because of the use of civilian technologies increasingly to have military effect, to remind us that you have rapid deployment capacity throughout the Pacific Island states, and intriguingly also to use this podium to apply for membership of the ADMM Plus. We'll see how far that goes, but meanwhile there's always the Shangri-La dialogue to engage with the ADMM Plus partners, whether one is a member or not, and that, I hope, is an enduring value of this large and inclusive forum. It's a delight to now ask Minister Kishi of Japan to address this second plenary. Minister Kishi.
チップマン首相、それからラリーの皆様、シャングリラ会合に参加できまして、大変光栄に存じます。お招きをいただきましてありがとうございました。新型コロナによる困難な
Dr. Chipman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly honored to participate in the IS Shangri-La Dialogue. While the COVID-19 pandemic is still posing challenges to the world, I am pleased that the dialogue is being held here in Singapore. I would like to pay my respects to the distinguished IISS delegates and to the government of Singapore who have made this consistent efforts to hold the dialogue. I'm also honored to have the opportunity to speak in this session together with Mr. Sébastien Créponu, Minister of Armed Forces France, which among European countries in particular has continued to assert its active engagement in the Pacific, and also with General Prabowo Subianto, Minister of Defense of Indonesia, which will be chairing the G20 leaders meeting this year. Today, under the theme Managing Geopolitical Competition in a Multipolar Region, I would like to discuss about Japan's efforts. Russia's ongoing outrageous acts of aggression against Ukraine are nothing but a unilateral change of the status quo by force, a clear infringement of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It is also a serious violation of international law and the United Nations Charter prohibiting the use of force, and Japan has strongly condemned it. Furthermore, Russia must be held accountable for the mass killing of innocent civilians in Ukraine, a grave breach of international humanitarian law. The response to Russia's aggression against Ukraine influences not only the fate of Ukraine, but also that of the rules-based international order that had been established up till today. Were it not for the international community's unified and resolute opposition, this order could have been collapsed, leading to global turmoil. The world is now in the midst of a competition between countries protecting the rules-based international order and those attempting to change it by force. I believe we can draw the following lessons from the ongoing invasion. First, the danger posed by countries that possess or are developing nuclear weapons, but who disregard the rules, is real and present. We are reminded once again of a terrible fact that there is a state which is actually willing to threaten others with its nuclear weapons and use powerful military capabilities in an attempt to unilaterally change the status quo. Second, even when facing such aggression, with the steadfast resistance from the invaded country and cooperation of the entire international community, an invasion's momentum can be curtailed. And if a country conspiring to invade another can be made sufficiently cognizant of this lesson, then we should be able to deter such aggression from reoccurring in other regions in the world. Third, the international community can support such collective efforts even at a great distance, or if separated from the region. Many states and private organizations are engaged in various measures. They are enforcing powerful sanctions against Russia, providing large-scale assistance to Ukraine for its resistance, and are launching initiatives to deal with Russian disinformation campaigns that seek to justify the invasion. I call on the international community to continue its endeavors in solidarity. These lessons just mentioned can be applied to the Indo-Pacific region, for it also has latent issues synonymous with the current invasion, whose severity and uncertainty are increasing at a markedly rapid speed. To begin with, while Russia has attacked Ukraine, it has been intensifying its military activities in the Far East and the Pacific. Furthermore, as Russia is under intense international sanctions, there is a possibility that Sino-Russia ties may deepen further. And there is no doubt that many countries are also increasingly concerned by the joint military activities conducted by China and Russia, two major military powers. In the South China and East China Seas, unilateral change or attempts to change the status quo backed by force continue to occur. The peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait, situated between these said waters, is important not only to the security of Japan, but also the stability of the international community. However, in this region, we are witnessing attempts to rapidly and comprehensively enhance military power without transparency. And even worse, the protagonists, since the beginning of this year, North Korea has repeatedly launched missiles at an unprecedented high rate and in new ways, while referring to the strengthening of its nuclear power. The recent developments of nuclear and missile-related technologies by North Korea threaten the peace and security of my country and the region and the international community, which is totally unacceptable.
We are facing the reality that actors provoking such problems not only possess or are developing nuclear weapons, but are also taking actions that ignore the rules. It is safe to say that the international community already shares the concern that a situation akin to Russia's aggression against Ukraine could erupt in the Indo-Pacific. Japan has earnestly followed the path of a peace-loving nation since the end of World War II. We have faithfully played by international law, have attached importance to strengthening the rule of law, and have also consistently pursued peaceful resolutions based on international law for disputes between sovereign states. Nevertheless, at present, not only is Japan surrounded by actors that both possess or are developing nuclear weapons and are ignoring the rules, but also, year by year, they're becoming more open in their disregard for them. Japan is located right at the front line to oppose behaviors which flout the rules and for protecting the rules-based international order. In light of this situation, as self-induced efforts, Japan will initially revise strategic documents and will accelerate the fundamental reinforcement of defense capabilities. So it is even more closely follow the path of a peace-loving nation. And then to that end, we will secure the necessary defense budget. We will also further elevate the Japan-US alliance, which is a foundation for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region, and we will strengthen its deterrence and response capabilities. The fundamental strengthening of defense capabilities by Japan, which is at the front line facing up to actions that disregard the rules, demonstrates our firm resolve that unilateral change of status quo by force will never be tolerated. I am sure that it will break the will of those aiming to ignore the rules towards Japan or in the Indo-Pacific region. We must not condone any unilateral change of the status quo by force, not only towards Japan, but in any nation or region, without straying from the path to a peace-loving nation by even a step. Japan will continue to do all that we can to prevent rule-flouting actions and to stamp out such harmful intentions. The vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific, FOIP, that Japan has been promoting is exactly the endeavor to advance cooperation to protect the international rules-based order. We will continue to strive to realize FOIP, made possible by the expanding prevalence of principles such as the rule of law, freedom of navigation and overflight, and free trade, by pursuing economic prosperity and ensuring peace and security. To fully accomplish FOIP, cooperation with ASEAN countries located at the nexus of the Indian and Pacific Oceans is fundamental. My country gives its total support to AOIP, the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which was adopted by ASEAN to contribute to the maintenance of peace, freedom, and prosperity in the region. AOIP shares fundamental principles with the free and open Indo-Pacific vision. Japan and ASEAN share concerns about and strongly oppose unilateral attempts to change the status quo backed by force. We have emphasized the importance of the rule of law and work together to deal with security challenges in the region. Japan anticipates that ASEAN, with its centrality and unity, will build mutually beneficial partnerships with each country, and we will continue our cooperation. Collaborating with countries that ignore the rules can never be mutually beneficial. Countries that ignore the rules take advantage of their partners' weaknesses through international loans and the like, and try to exploit their partners to advance their own national interests. I would like to point out that if cooperation is deepened with such countries, it ultimately damages one's own interests. There is no inclusive framework that covers the entire Indo-Pacific region. It is, therefore, all the more important to bring out FOIP by reinforcing the international law-based rules through various ASEAN-centered frameworks, such as Japan ASEAN Fora, ASEAN +3, and the East Asia Summit. In addition, the role of security frameworks such as ADMM+, which plays a constructive role building regional resilience, is increasingly important. Also, as an effort in this region, in order to achieve FOIP, we will develop the four-nation Japan, United States, Australia and India cooperation framework into a more tangible initiative. Japan will also promote cooperation with countries in and out of the region, beginning with European countries that share our fundamental values. Efforts to realize FOIP such as these make a substantial contribution to the maintenance and strengthening of the rules-based international order. By their wide-ranging and multi-layered actions in response, it is important to stop aggression against countries that are ignoring this rule-based international order, exactly as in response to Russia's aggression against Ukraine. When even in a crisis hits the Indo-Pacific, I'm confident that the international community can act as one to rebuff such an attempt to disregard the rules. In order to do so, countries protecting the international order should strategically convey the message that they will be working together in solidarity, as well as strengthening their defense capabilities. In this way, we must make it acutely clear to rule-flouting actors that it is impossible to change the rules-based international order by force. I would like to emphasize that no one should underestimate the strong solidarity of the countries protecting the rules-based international order. I would like to reinforce that point. We are now standing at a historic crossroad for the protection of the international rules-based order. In order to deal with this, Japan, which is standing on the front line against actions that disregard the rules, will continue to fundamentally reinforce its defense capabilities. Furthermore, in order to realize FOIP, we will continue our ceaseless efforts to expand the number of like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific region and in the international community. It is such sustained efforts that will bring about the preservation and strengthening of the rules-based order. Thank you very much.
Thank you for reminding us that deterrents of nuclear powers, or those who seek to acquire nuclear weapons, is extremely important. And I think reimagining deterrence in the contemporary age is a strategic obligation of all those who are interested in the defense and security sphere. Deterrence, whether conventional or nuclear, has to be reimagined at a time when the ways in which force is used now is so varied. And thank you also for reminding us that Russian activities in the Far East have been a major factor in making you reconsider your diplomatic relations, but also your defense posture. And let me just remind everybody in the audience that the defense economics analysis that the IISS has made is that if both Germany and Japan were to reach the 2% NATO standard of GDP expenditure on defense, that would mean that within a year or two, the third and fourth biggest defense spenders in the world would be Japan and Germany. Very difficult to imagine 3 or 4 years ago that after US and China, that the next two biggest defense spenders would be Germany and Japan. So our geopolitical order really has changed more than might be perceived. I have more than a dozen people who seek to ask questions, so my rule for this session will be that I will invite 8 or 9 presentations, as many as I can pick up, come back to the panel, and then invite them all in 2 minutes or so to answer crisply and elegantly the questions that will have been posed. So I ask for as much discipline from the questioners as I typically ask from those formally in the podium. Let me invite first Ankit Panda of the US. Ankit, go ahead.
Thank you. My comment is for Minister Kishi. Minister, thank you for your remarks, and particularly the focus on nuclear weapons issues. Since the last time the Shangri-La Dialogue convened in 2019, there's been a major revelation. The United States has assessed a considerable shift in China's nuclear posture, assessing that Beijing may possess 700 nuclear warheads by 2027 and as many as 1,000 potentially by 2030. I'd like to ask you to share your views on, first, why you believe a country in China's position would pursue such a buildup in its nuclear capability, and more broadly, what the implications are for peace and security in the Indo-Pacific and the world at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from Japan and also the IISS, Mariko Togashi.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. I also have a question for Minister Kishi. You mentioned securing Japan's defense budget, and Prime Minister Kishida also mentioned a significant increase in the defense budget last night. Currently, in Japan, the public and political interest in defense is becoming very high. Given this momentum, do you think raising the defense budget to 2% of GDP is realistic? If not, what are the main obstacles? Also, within the increase, which capabilities can we assume? Thank you.
And from Indonesia, Sophie Siarif.
Thank you. My question is for Pak Prabowo. It's good to finally be able to ask you a question. But in light of ASEAN's inability to come up with meaningful security cooperation and Indonesia's growing economic cooperation with China, how do you plan to navigate the security issues concerning China's ongoing policy in South China Sea, as well as East Asia, which impacted Indonesia's own Natuna? Thank you.
And from India, Shruti Pandalai.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. My question is for the French minister. So you mentioned French efforts in the Pacific Islands, specifically New Caledonia, and we understand that you have a unique experience there. But at the moment, the geopolitics of the Pacific Islands are at the forefront of geostrategic competition. The issue featured quite prominently at the Quad Summit in Tokyo. So let me ask you that, what do like-minded countries like France, along with partners in the Quad, can do specifically together to deliver in terms of the region's needs, acknowledge the region's agency beyond rhetoric, and of course, have we learned our lessons in terms of not giving the region, to choose in terms of binary choices? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And from China, Yongsheng Tang. Go ahead.
Thank you. 首先对印度尼西亚
First of all, I would like to have a response to the defense minister of Indonesia. He mentioned about that every country and every has a right to create a multilateralism rather than creating a small circle. So through collaboration among all countries, will have a more optimistic future in this region. I would like to ask a question to the Japanese defense minister. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Japan mentioned about a world without nuclear power. However, in the recent times, we have seen the revision of the constitution, and there are voices about nuclear power or nuclear weapons. So I want to ask Defense Minister, what's your view on this?
Very much. Next is Darshana Barua from India.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. My question is also to the Minister of Armed Forces, France. You mentioned French territories in both the Indian Ocean and the Pacific and the importance of maritime security. The other nation with a coastline in both the Indian Ocean and the Pacific is Australia. Given the challenges at hand vis-a-vis maritime security and a new leadership in Canberra, can we expect to see some key trilaterals for the region, such as the India, Australia, and France, return to the table, which has been paused since the announcement of AUKUS? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next person on my list I'd like to introduce quite specially, Shui Tiankai. I remember 18 years ago, Shui Tiankai, when you were head of policy planning in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you asked a very tough question of Secretary Don Rumsfeld. Here you are again 18 years later after having served your country as U.S. ambassador to China. The floor is yours, Shui. So I take the microphone that's beside you. No, the microphone that is being handed to you. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your kind words. As you said, I asked a couple of questions to then Secretary Rumsfeld many years ago. So I intended to be fair to Secretary Austin when he spoke, but I did not have the chance. But let me thank the Minister of Indonesia for his remarks, especially his remarks about the Asian way of solving problems. I appreciate this very much, especially compared with the statement by Secretary Austin early in the morning. And my question, first of all, is to the Minister of France. We certainly welcome our European friends to join us for regional stability and prosperity. But are you ready to respect and appreciate the Asian way of solve problems? Is there any attempt to impose on us the NATO way or the European way? And my question in this regard, I think it's important to have a good understanding of the idea of multipolar region. When we talk about multipolar region, we are not talking about one or two so-called major powers. We should have a balanced approach to the needs and concerns of all the regional countries, including important regional organizations like the ASEAN. Then my question to Minister Kishi of Japan, this is very specific. Does Japan still intend to dump nuclear waste water into the Pacific? Because this has caused a lot of concern, security concerns, and environmental concerns in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from Lebanon, Reem Momtaz.
Thank you, John. I just have a double question to the French Minister of Defense, Sébastien Lecornu. The first one is, Mr. Minister, you spoke, and obviously you were very forceful about how important the problems of the Indo-Pacific are to Europe, and how engaged Europe is in the problems of the Indo-Pacific. Yet you were the only minister from a major European country that is present today here. The German and the UK ministers aren't here. Is there a credibility issue here on the European side? And the second part of my question is, you said that the problems of the Indo-Pacific are also problems for Europe. Are you expecting more clear positioning by some of the major forces in Asia when it comes to the Russian war in Ukraine? Thank you.
Aaron Connolly.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. Minister Prabowo, I would like to ask you about Indonesia's free and active foreign policy. Your predecessor, Muhammad Hatta, the proclamator, set out Indonesia's foreign policy in 1948 along the lines of the free and active foreign policy. And you've spoken at length about Indonesia's anti-colonial struggle and the anti-colonial struggles of the region during that period. But what does the free and active policy mean for Indonesia today? How does it apply to the struggle between the United States and China in particular, taking it from its US-Russia context in 1948? Thank you.
And from Australia, Natalie Samby.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. My question is also to Bapak Prabowo. You spoke so eloquently about the Asian way of resolving challenges in the region. May I ask your reaction to whether AUKUS and the Quad are compatible with the Asian way? And with the election of a new government in Australia, Foreign Minister Penny Wong has announced greater initiatives with the Pacific. What opportunities are there for Indonesia to work together with Australia and other countries in order to support the Pacific on issues like climate change? Thank you.
And the Executive Director of IISS Asia, James Crabtree.
Thank you, John. This question echoes slightly the question from Darshana Baram, and it is to Minister Lecornu. In September 2021, Australia, with the United Kingdom and the United States, signed the AUKUS agreement, causing some disagreements between France and its partners, particularly with Australia. This morning, Prime Minister Albanese released new details of the settlement that has been reached with Naval Group, noting that there are now two new governments in France and Australia, and indeed two new ministers attending this Shangri-La dialogue. I wanted to ask if you were optimistic on the prospects of a rapprochement between France and Australia in particular.
And the last question before we return to the panel, and I apologize to the 14 who won't have an opportunity, our defense economist, Fenella McGurty.
Thank you, John. So my question is for Minister Kishi, and it builds on Mariko's question earlier, just when more detail might be provided on the drastic strengthening of defence resources for Japan. What consideration is being given to the fiscal conditions in Japan and how such increases might be funded, whether it be through taxation or other cuts elsewhere within the budget? And will there also be a capability development plan accompanying these increases? Thank you.
Fenella, thank you very much. So our three ministers have a bit of a challenge. They have about 3 or 4 minutes each to answer these questions and make their points. For Pak Prabowo, there was quite a bit on the South China Sea. No doubt the Natuna Islands is also a question that sometimes brings China and Indonesia, at least politically, into conflict, free and active, and whether the AUKUS and Quad are compatible with the Asian way of defense diplomacy. Pak Prabowo, over to you.
I start first.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I have 3 questions, I think, that overlaps each other. One question is from, I think, from Indonesia. Tadi namanya saya kurang jelas ya. Was from the lady from Indonesia that asked the first question. And the second is from Mr. Connolly from the United States about our free and active foreign policy that has originated even before we officially got our sovereignty or independence. And the third from the lady from Australia, I think, Miss Penelope, I think is that, also asking about AUKUS, is AUKUS and the Quad compatible with the Asian way? I think this it's a bit overlapping. I just would like to reiterate, first of all, that our tradition that Mr. Connolly correctly states started from even before we were officially a sovereign nation. We chose consciously to be free and not be engaged in military alliances. This is because of our outlook that we consider ourselves to respect all major powers and all our neighbors. That is the fundamental source of this conviction. And I would like also to allude to a famous answer given by, I think, one of the great leaders of the world, who was a victim of injustice, Nelson Mandela, when he was asked, I think it was in New York at a meeting, he was asked whether he considers Fidel Castro, Muammar Gaddafi to be icons or to be good examples. I think his answer was that your enemy does not necessarily be my enemy. And he also alluded that those who helped the struggle of the ANC in hard times will never be forgotten by the ANC, by the black people of South Africa in the good times. And that is our position, that we have good relations. We were supported by the United States in our struggle for independence. The United States helped us in many critical times. We were supported by Australia in our struggle for independence. We remember Australian labor unions striking for our independence. We remember Australian workers refusing to handle Dutch cargo. And that's why we also remember that Russia has also helped Indonesia. At that time it was the Soviet Union. And we also remember that China was a leading member of the anti-imperialist movement. And China has always been good friends with Indonesia. We have our differences. We had our differences. But now the Asian way is that each country has their own way of solving their problems. But each country has to maintain good relations with their neighbors and with all the great powers of the world. That is the Asian way. So if I'm asked, is AUKUS or the Quad compatible with the Asian way, my answer is that every country has to decide for themselves what their priorities, what their security needs are. If the members of AUKUS think or consider that for their interest and for their security they need to have AUKUS, it is not Indonesia's duty, or it's not Indonesia's right to have an opinion on the opinions of those respective countries. We do not believe in, let us say, alliances that could in the end also threaten other countries. But that is our opinion. We respect the opinions of other countries. If the members of the Quad consider that it is in their interest, we will respect that. But once again, I would like to reiterate, the question here is that we must always consider and respect the national interests and the rightful interests of the People's Republic of China. China has been a great civilization. They have been leaders of Asia for many thousands of years. I've said that many times. Their influence permeates all Southeast Asia. So we urge everybody to respect the rightful rise of China back to its position as a great civilization. Therefore, even we have some differences, we will strive to solve those differences in an amicable and in a mutually beneficial way. That is the Asian way. We have differences with Singapore. We had differences with Malaysia. We have differences now with Malaysia. But we consider Malaysia very close to us, and we are determined to solve those differences without resort to any force. That's our determination. We had territorial disputes. Remember Sipadan and Legitan. Now we still have problems. But as I said, I would like to reiterate, Indonesia is determined to resolve the differences with our neighbors without resort to any use of force. We are convinced that with friendly cooperation, everybody wins. Thank you very much.
Bapak Prabowo, many thanks indeed. To Sébastien Lecornu, I think there were questions around the Pacific Island states, European engagement with the Indo-Pacific, what your thoughts were on the AUKUS arrangements, and then specifically on whether there was now a fresh opportunity for Franco-Australian relations to strengthen, and also for relations between France, Australia, and India in a trilateral form also to increase. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, in fact, there are three families of questions among the various interventions, especially the first one about the form, but it gives also meaning. That's a question asked by the Lebanon. Why are there so few Europeans here in Singapore? I think that we need a direct answer. Let's start by apologizing. Our friend Borrell, for health reason, cannot be with us today. He would have carried the voice of the European Union, and also present the French singularity. We preside the Council of the European Union. Through me, I think that this is the word of most major nations who have an agenda regarding the Indo-Pacific with concrete measures, but it's also clear that we also assume not a French-only position, but the position as France being present in the Indo-Pacific, having territories there. I have left part of my heart in New Caledonia. That's why I spoke about it. But let's not forget about Mayotte and La Réunion Island. They are the main overseas territories in the Indian Ocean for us, with more than 1 million French inhabitants in the area. So it's very clear that the French presence in the Indo-Pacific must not be justified. Sometimes people fear and say that the crisis in Europe, in Ukraine, might that take us away from the Indo-Pacific, or might that lead the French Republic to come back on some important commitments, even military commitments. This will not be the case. We are not blindsided. The Ukraine doesn't make us blindsided in the way we look at the world and Asia. The second series of questions was the spirit, our posture. And thank you for the frank and direct question. Will you come with European glasses? Will you understand the specificities of the Indo-Pacific, Asia, or South Pacific? Well, first of all, I just said it. We are present there. And please believe me when I say that the French populations in Polynesia, Mayotte, the Reunion, or New Caledonia defend a regional approach and their specificities. Just go and ask the various political parties there to understand that the environment is first regional, from the local to the global. That's how we try to develop things. And for the rest, I'm sad if I did not manage to reassure you enough in my speech, but the ASEAN is the multinational forum by excellence in which we want to work. That's why we would like to join the ADMM+. This really shows that our approach starts from the Indo-Pacific. We do not try to be in a wrong or an imbalanced position and to be quick and to stick to the allocated time. It is our responsibility not to lock our partners and our competitors down into binary choices. We have to be good. We have to be on time in the multinational domain. We, as Europeans, within the European Union, we also have a lot of work to do. It's all the more important since Brexit has a lot of territories come out of the Indo-Pacific, Commonwealth territories. So France is a kind of framework nation of Europe in the region. We have a theme-based approach. I do not have to describe that, but environmental, climatic issues, the issue of pressure to have access to fishing resources, to natural resources, to port and airport infrastructure. The COVID has destabilized and weakened a number of operators in the area. So these are topics that we need to put on the table in order not to be locked down into binary solution, block against block, and to just focus on sovereignty or misunderstood sovereignty issues. So we need to muscle up the multilateral dimension. We need to listen to the expectations and needs of all the states, even the smaller states of the area, because it's our duty to do so. Third question, our relationship with Australia. I must admit that I was quite expecting this question. So I'm going to answer it very frankly. First of all, our hosts in Singapore can bear testimony of that, but my colleague and friends from Indonesia can say it also. In its partnership, whatever the partnership, but also the defense partnership, France is proud of being reliable and of keeping its word, even when there are difficulties mentioned among friends that we encounter. Yes, the given word is very important to us, and the given word has a price, has value. Secondly, you recall that I'm young, but I have old reflexes, and I think and I believe in history and geography. History is the young Australians who came to die on French soil during World War I. It's those major partnerships as allies. We should not forget that. There are ups and downs in all relations between countries, but when there were real dramas, Australia was there. Let's not forget our history. I also like geography. New Caledonia is still French. It is one of the largest neighbors of Australia. So we are neighbors. Paris is not close to Canberra, but undisputedly Noumea is close to Canberra. And these are unchanging realities. They are here for the very long term. And finally, if I look at it from a political angle, there have been elections. There are elections in Australia, elections in France. In Australia, the previous majority was not re-elected, and in France, Emmanuel Macron was re-elected. So it gives us an interesting discussion framework, and I will have the opportunity to take some time with my new defense minister counterpart. He is new, I am new. So this will give us the opportunity to define an agenda together. And a naval group will also have to take its responsibilities in the discussions, of course, with Australia to settle the past, but we have to look at the future based on everything we discussed this morning about the Indo-Pacific. And I would like to thank India for its 2 questions, because it recalls how the quality of the relations between France and India is key. And it is through this relation that the President of the French Republic has validated this strategy in the Indo-Pacific. It started historically with the relation with India.
About 3 minutes left, but Minister Kishi, you were asked actually 3 very specific questions. One, about Chinese nuclear weapons modernization and increase. Two, about nuclear waste going into the waters. And third, about how you would be able to support your defense expenditure increases. So your answer to those three questions, perhaps, sir.
Firstly, in the face of the situation in Ukraine, countries with nuclear weapons are now seen to be using as a form of threat. This is something that could happen anywhere in the world, and we can't say that it will not be repeated. So what we need to do is to have a very solid coordination with each other and deliver a unified message. And by doing so, we need to be able to deal with the situation. We have to reaffirm the ability to deter the use of nuclear weapons. With regards to Asia, not only nuclear weapons, but missile technologies and other technologies are advancing at a very rapid pace, and we need to have a firm and solid approach to these developments. This is key in order for us to protect the livelihoods of our citizens. And for this, we need to relook at the fundamental capabilities of our defense power. And in the case of Japan, this involves looking into the required defense budget and preparing the necessary setup. It also includes such areas as anti-cyber capabilities, as information sharing, and such areas. And we need to make sure that we can continue to maintain our superiority. And for that purpose, we intend to secure the necessary funding. With regards to the release of waters off Fukushima, it is only after properly and thoroughly verifying the safety of the effluent that we will be releasing it to the oceans. 岸大臣、ルコンノ大臣、プラボノ大臣、皆さん発表ありがとうございます。
For your nations and the regions in which you serve. Could I ask everyone to thank our ministers in the usual way? You have a 29-minute coffee break.